everyone to the session Shaping the Future of Decoupled Drupal. Instead of what he said in the beginning, it is an unusual case study, and we're looking forward to give you the business perspective on SILVERBACK. You might have already heard a lot about it in the tech talks from Jamie or Fran before, and then Stu afterwards, yesterday and today. About us. This is Pascal, he's a senior PO at Amazing Labs, and I'm Stephanie, the CEO of the company. It's almost a fun fact, we're actually both based in Switzerland, and because we're a company of Drupal experts, that's quite uncommon because we're spread all around the world. For the agenda, since we have a short session today, intro is very short, I'll then give you the overview of the so-called SILVERBACK case, let you know what is it exactly, how have we done it, and where do we stand today. Pascal will then have a bit more time to delve into the learnings he has had as the project manager of the largest part of SILVERBACK, and then we also do a quick look into the future, and we have some time for questions at the end. All right, what is SILVERBACK? In our company, we develop large websites for corporates. And so we have different development teams, and we found out those two teams develop similar requirements or similar things, but we had various solutions. So we wanted to get towards a unified distribution, or so to speak, a unified solution, and make sure that all the development work for those similar requirements that we have, that the developers could access the same pool, so to speak, of instruments or of code work that we've done. Secondly, we also heavily wanted to depend on the Decoupled framework and just make sure that we have the state-of-the-art development environment and tech that we use. Some of you might know SILVERBACK is actually a gorilla, and we have identified 4 limbs of this so-called gorilla. On one hand, we want to further develop GraphQL as one of the key elements for us in order to achieve our targets. We want to significantly advance the editor experience that editors have within Drupal. Workspaces is a huge topic for us because we all know within Drupal, especially when it comes to multinational aspects or multilingual aspects, Drupal can be better or advanced. And furthermore, the developer experience in itself. As an intro, so we do have this tech vision now, but that's when the business reality actually kicks in. What you see here, we're a Swiss-based SME. That means a small and medium enterprise, 45 people around the world. As said before, we're specialized in Drupal and React websites, always large scale. We have an agency business model, and all of that translates into about 7 million of revenue yearly, and about 500,000 to 600,000 investment volume that we would have put aside now for this specific business case. From the client positioning, that's a very important factor that will come into play. We mainly work with mid-sized companies to very large ones. So 150 employees to 100,000 employees. And the average project size, it's usually 150 to 700,000 francs, and lasts between 9 to a year and a half. 9 months to a year and a half. So when I got this tech vision from my incredibly talented dev team, I just thought, how can we invest that? How can we pay for this? Because it's always a part of the reality. And I've identified 4 main levers. On one hand, because we're so heavily into the open source space, we could work on activating the community more and get more developers help us develop this SILVERBACK. So I put this here as a marketing increase. Try to talk more about what we want to achieve and get the support from the community. The second lever will be the self-investment. So what I said before, we had those 500,000, 600,000 that I could put aside comfortably for making an investment into this case. The third one would be external financing, because we have a very strong open source mindset. This was not very compatible because, as you can imagine, external people that give in external money always want to just adjust or attach a bit of a license fee, or want to make sure that they get a return on their investment. So that was actually completely ruled out for me from the beginning. And then the fourth option, and that's actually very special for us, is that we enter a client partnership. So we have this large pool of corporate clients, and they need to solve the issues that I said above. So I'm talking editor experience or the workspaces, for example. And I just thought, hey, maybe one of the companies or various ones are ready to collaborate with us on this, because obviously they have a lot more resources to draw from than we do. And I was about to sign off on the self-investment case when Software Tinder happened. So we got approached by a large company in Europe, and they asked us to do a prototype for them. And what was very special about this prototype, but you can see the initial requirements, it basically covers exactly what we wanted to do with SILVERBACK. So we have the content API in there, obviously GraphQL, where we put our game on, or we want to be strong at. We have the editorial backend, and we have this feasibility to create the personalized and localized content. For me, as a business person, it was very good to see the way or why they approached us. We do a lot of contribution work, and this is actually now a company that has seen that recognizes that, and this way we were able to attract them. So they saw that, for example, we employ one of the maintainers of the GraphQL module, and with all the client cases that we have had and the work experience, especially in the decoupled field, we had a lot of market credibility, and that's the reason why they came to us. Nevertheless, we still had to enter a pitch. Now, what did we do? We took those requirements, and within the first 3 days already fulfilled them. And we used the rest of that month to really go in hard and show them what SILVERBACK or Drupal and decoupling technology actually is capable of. And after that 1 month, we went back to the client and told them, look, this is what we can do. Do you want to go on this journey with us? Well, it's always, or I think it's very special when you can show a client and you can convince them technically what you're capable of doing. But then again, there's always the business rationale that comes up. And we did win that pitch, luckily. And for me, key aspects of it all, so the business key aspects that I found in there was, it was very important that we could make sure that we can work in the Scrum team setup we usually work in, because we needed to play to our strengths. If we wanted to realize what we promised them, we needed to make sure we can do it in our way. When you work with such a large client, obviously there are technical restrictions you usually don't have, so it means you can't use your own dev environment, you have to use theirs, you have to use some of their technical setup. It just might make the matter a bit more complex. And for us, it was extremely helpful just to make sure from the beginning to know what situation we're facing. And then the 2 points, that procurement and legal, for me, those are the main aspects of it all. To make sure that we have a well and good and sustainable collaboration. This approach, we were already able to replicate so far. So when I first got in touch with the corporate procurement of that client, or I've actually been in touch with corporate procurements ever since, I felt a bit like this scenario. So there's this big bear, very friendly, but we all know they're not usually that friendly. And I felt like the little rabbit in the grass. And I think with lots of smaller companies that do a lot of innovation, when they choose and collaborate with larger ones, it's very important that you're not losing your sight. Throughout all the corporate processes they're going to put you through, make sure that you do not buckle under the pressure that there is, and that you stand behind your processes and your innovation. Because never underestimate the benefit that you bring in by being very innovative. So I negotiated about 2 months, I think, with the procurement department. And even though we showed them technically what we're capable of, that was almost the point where make it or break it. What was so very important for us is that we could stick to our agile approach. Procurement, on the other hand, they want to make sure that you're comparable to other offers. They want to make you accountable. They want to know exactly what person works on what, even down to developer level. And they also want to predict what kind of cost arises. Now, of course, with the accountability, for example, we black box our development teams where we can't yet say who's going to work on what, because the team obviously self-organized, decide this themselves. What made the difference in the end for us? We became rather creative in this. We really tried to work with them together to get them somewhat of the comparability, so they could compare our offer to others. And with the accountability, that was something I remained firm, because for us that was really a black line, could not be crossed. And with the predictability, we tried to accommodate them as much as possible, but then again, with the requirements we had, of course, now after a year of starting this, it was not very predictable in the end. I went in there with one of the biggest points for us, and for me it was extremely important that we could contribute all the work that we do there, or almost everything, back to the open source community. Corporates tend to just close everything off. They want security, they want secrecy as well. Now, how I managed, or how we managed to actually get them to contribute together with us, was via a lower contribution rate. So I told them, with the pricing, we will lower it a tiny bit, about 10% I think, for all the code that we can contribute back to the open source community. And all our 4 corporate partners that have signed up for this project have since agreed to this. So it was a bit of a special approach with the pricing, but it worked very well. 2 facts, keep in mind, for me, they're, especially with smaller businesses, they're very important. On one hand, we always want to go into negotiations very realistically and very optimistically as well. But corporates work differently. They have 1 year or 3 year budget cycles. And so rather go in less optimistic, because they do not like to change. So the number can be bigger. They're not faced by this, but just make sure that they don't have to restart their procurement processes too often. And the 4th point, and this is actually one of the, could even be business threatening, when you read through an NDA of such a corporate and you see the fines attached to this, if those would be triggered, your business will be gone. But they're also set up for suppliers that are usually a lot bigger. So, of course, you can't approach and say, hey, use my contract. It's not going to happen, because obviously they have their very strict, just basic documents. But what they do, you can come in and say, look, we're a smaller company. This is not proportionate. Would you be able to amend this? And they did. So this is how I try to approach negotiations with larger company, make sure that the business risk is contained for us. Now, after a bit more than a year, when we started this client partnership financing of our technical innovation, this is the status quo. We have now 4 corporate partnerships in total. We could generate 1.2 million in investment, so not even counting our own investment that we could do. I put in here countless contributions. I haven't counted them, but I haven't had one single developer coming up to me and say, Stephanie, you don't contribute too much, enough. So as long as they're fine, I think we're fine with the contributions. We also supported bringing the delivery module into the core of Drupal, build up a lot of the conflict resolution, and very interestingly for you probably is that we thoroughly broadly tested GraphQL and our innovations on there. What's very important here, when you work for a corporate, you're not just going to see, is it working for one market? Everything is big, 70 market, processes need to work to go do, pretty much test out every single edge case there is. It feels like it. So I find the outcome is very high quality. And I just summarized it all as SILVERBACK is growing. And Pascal will now give you insight of the learnings we've had through this specific and a bit special investment process that we undertook.
Thank you, Stephanie. So first of all, I think I have 12 minutes to talk, but when we look at the clock, it's going to be very tight. So I guess this is another business reality. The CEO talks too much and we have to sort it out then. So what I would like to show you is some key learnings on these, on one of the biggest projects that we're running in this setup. So it's basically, we have some decoupled inputs, we have some organizational inputs and some generic inputs, and we just think that it is worth spreading here with you. So first of all, open source. So so we perceive that the multinational companies, they're pretty hesitant in using open source technology. So most of the time, those big companies, they're not really entrepreneurial driven, they're more managerial driven. So this means they have a great understanding or a great sensitivity for responsibility, for accountability, for like avoiding, reducing risks. And therefore they like to have a focal point or like a main contributor that actually maintains the software. For example, Adobe Experience Manager with Adobe as the backer there. And so this just helps them to tell the managers, well, there's a product roadmap, this product is constantly further developed. And they can also say, well, there's a central authority that takes care if there's a bug, if there's a security issue. However, in real life, we know that Adobe does not really well when it comes to security, and also like the roadmap. The big companies, they don't have any influence on the roadmap. So basically, it's Adobe or whoever who sets this roadmap. So what we have learned also in the course of this project is that I would say in the rising of decentralized systems like cloud computing and other software, that the legal departments and the risk departments of this company, that they started to feel more comfortable with decentralized setup, so with something that does not have a focal authority there. And in terms of that, multinationals seem to open up for open source software, and in our case, I think they can really leverage on certain advantages. For example, they can reduce the lock-in, so they can just take the software package, go to another provider, or even take it, internalize it, and further contribute to it. They can also lower the costs for development and operations. So one example, I got told that they're currently using Adobe Experience Manager, and they wanted to change the page title in the project. And they got an offer, a quote for $10,000 just to change the page title. And so we told them, well, if you have to do it, it's maximum a day or even less. So I think this is kind of where we're talking about. Also, what they really like is that they can set the roadmap. So they can tell us, well, we would like to do this, this, and this, and we develop it for them, contribute it back to the community. Community grows, and basically their product grows. So this is something which is hugely appreciated by the companies. And also, I find the last one pretty interesting. They see that as a recruiting pool. They want to be more appealing to the development community. They want to be more open, more liberal, and they see the open source community as a huge opportunity, recruiting pool for them. Next one is about decoupled. What we felt is that the decoupled procurement process is a good way to circumvent the procurement process. Procurement is pretty much in the old waterfall approach. So the problem is they actually need responsibility. They need a deliverable at the end of the project, and they want to know what is it. So they want to have line items, and we have to tell, well, this is this needs so much effort, and then they will basically rate us on that, and then we will have tons of discussion. I think when we work decoupled, so we can improve the quotation process because we are experts in what we actually do, so we just work on our main domain, and we can advise them or quote them better because we can do a better risk assessment and we can see more into it. And on the other side, I think, so while this makes it better, because we don't really know what the other teams are doing, we deliberately need to leave blank fields, or we need to leave room to unexpected things. So basically, it reduces the accountability for us to really go line item by line item, and it really opens up room for agile an agile approach. So I think in the end, the decoupled approach really helps us to circumvent those line items and this accountability and start into a true agile approach. Then next learning is that the decoupled approach helps us to foster innovation. So basically, if you're in a big setup with huge teams, you have a lot of stakeholders, and all the meetings tend to be huge. So, and I think in terms of innovation, if you have a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people that have their own agenda and that would like to see their own things in the product, it just kills innovation. So I think innovation rather comes from small teams where you can move forward quickly, where you can try out things and assess whether that's good, whether it works or not. And here in the decoupled system, or in the decoupled setup, we basically also reduce the team sizes. So because we're just working in our domain, we reduce the dependencies to the outside world, to other teams, and therefore we can really try in our domain, we can try out new things and therefore bring in our lean processes that we at the Macy Labs are actually used to live up to, and we can really apply that even in the multinational company environment. Next one. This is rather something which is a little bit on the negative side. So when you work decoupled on a project basis, it increases the risk of silos. The problem is, so every team, every domain works on their own stuff. They see their cosmos, their universe, and it's hard for them to see outside of this universe. What we have encountered here on this project is that once the editors started to work in the CMS, they worked in the CMS, so they were not really aware of the setup. They were not aware that front end is another system than the back end. And when they started and they clicked on the preview, they saw an error, and basically it was the CMS because they were interacting with the CMS. So basically this led to a situation where we got just overwhelmed with support requests because everyone thought it's the CMS who's making the problems here, and we had to do a lot of triage, we had to do a lot of backlog work, and this took a lot of focus from our side and also increased, of course, the workload that we did not plan for. And therefore, it's really important if you engage in such kind of project that you establish processes and stuffing quite quickly. So basically it's about a good support, central support process where you can raise tickets and that can do that these people, they need to be enabled to do the triage and then really distribute the tickets. If you do it that well, I think you can overcome these decoupled problems quite easily, and it works pretty well. And I need to hurry up, sorry. Nevertheless, here, this organizational issue here, I think this is interesting to know that. So basically, the way how we worked on this project was with the Scaled Agile Framework. I think this basically saved our lives. I think such a big project, so we had 11 teams working together. You cannot manage that on a team-based, on a meeting-based approach. It would just lead to too big meetings, too many dependencies, and you would lose yourself in this complexity. So we actually met every 6 to 8 weeks in the PI plannings, and you just have to imagine, so it was a 2 days event with 40 people there. I just quickly did the math. I came up with $100,000 for just one meeting, and we had 8 of them, so that was just more or less 1 million on just talking. So no developing, nothing done yet, it's just talking. I think in a short-term perspective, it just seems crazy. In a long-term perspective, it's the only way how we can manage such a big project, especially when it's decoupled and the teams do not exactly know what the other teams are doing. Nevertheless, on top of that, you still need a lot of small-scale communication on an ad hoc basis in order to fine-tune everything. And this is basically something that we have completely underestimated and needed to adjust it a couple of times, like the estimation and the resourcing for that. Yeah, so I think if you have still questions, you can ask me later. So I think we're going to jump on the next topic.
No, sorry, just here quickly. Multinational companies, they always expect you to have more staff and to be able to scale like this. And obviously, we're experts, we don't have that. It's just something that we also underestimated a tiny bit.
Okay, the last one, then we can do it quite quickly. one of key thing is the big company pays you to develop their product, and at the same time we want to create a generic product. So we always had this trade-off to guide the customer between generic contribution or generic work that we can source back into the community and actually doing customer-specific things on a fast pace. And we just had to make sure that we really involve the customer in the planning and in the understanding of those processes at the early stage, so that we can overcome this risk.
And that also now leads just to end of it. Choosing the fourth investment lever was absolutely the right decision, and it's enabled us to a completely different scale of innovation here. But what we're doing now is actually starting to invest ourselves, because this is when we cannot, or when the product specifications of the client doesn't fulfill what we need in a SILVERBACK project any longer. But yeah, we were extremely lucky. I'm just going to jump over here. We've been largely working with Daimler on this, and with the other clients from us, and for us it's been a great big success story. And now it's been working for a year, and we're looking forward how it goes into the future. Any tech questions? Here are the guys that cover more that side, and if you also have questions for us, we'll be around the booth later. Thank you very much.